Hi students, in lesson 4.3 we are going to be talking about fraction decimal equivalents. Learning targets for today, we are going to be writing fractions as decimals. I want you to take a look at the key terms. Terminating and repeating decimals are also going to be something we are focusing on in 4.3, so keep that in mind when we get to that point in the lesson. We are actually going to skip problem 1 in 4.3, so go ahead and turn to page 253 and let's take a look at problem 2. As we have learned, we should know that decimals are numbers that are written in a system based on multiples of 10. You can see the examples in the table. We have 3/10ths, we have 71/100ths, we have 305 thousandths, and we have 24 10,000ths. So that 100, that 1,000, and that 10,000 are all multiples of 10. Take a look at the bottom of page 253 and our helper and the word bubble. We know that's very important information. Remembering back from chapter 3, in order to write an equivalent fraction, we are going to multiply or divide the fraction by a form of 1. The examples here show us how to write an equivalent fraction with a power of 10 in the denominator, and then it shows you its decimal equivalent. So that is what we are going to be doing at the top of page 254. We are going to be taking a look at a fraction that we are given, and we are going to be coming up with an equivalent fraction that has a power of 10 and finally converting that fraction into a decimal. So go ahead and work on number 1 with your group members. Rewrite each fraction as a decimal. Take a couple of minutes and fill out the table. Here is what your table should look like. If we have the fraction 2/5, that would be equivalent to 4/10ths, 4 over 10 as a fraction and 0.4 as a decimal. The fraction 7/20ths, equivalent fraction, we would have 35 over 100, 0.35 as our decimal, representing 35/100ths. 13/25ths, we would have 52 over 100 for our equivalent fraction and 0.52 as our decimal. 3/8 as a fraction, the equivalent would be 375 over 1,000 and our decimal would be 0.375. And finally 54/200ths, the equivalent fraction would be 27 over 100 with 0.27 as our decimal. Go ahead and take a look at number 2 on page 254 underneath the table. I would like you to write each fraction as a decimal. Here are what your decimals should look like for A through H. For letter A, you should have 0.7, letter B 0.07, letter C 0.007, and letter D 0.0007. For letter E, 5.9, letter F 0.59, letter G 0.059, and letter H 0.0059. Take a look at number 3 now and see if you can figure out any patterns that you notice about the decimals that you came up with for your answers in question 2. Hopefully one thing that you noticed, a pattern that you noticed about the decimals in question 2 was that the decimal point was moving one place to the left each time that you would divide by 10. Go ahead and take a look at number 4 at the bottom of the page. Write each decimal as a fraction or a mixed number. For letter A, you should have had 2 and 208 thousandths. For letter B, 900 thousandths. And for letter C, 9,023 10,000ths. Take a look at page 255. Now the fractions that we were dealing with prior to this page all had denominators, like we said, that were multiples of 10. Now there are some fractions that have denominators that are not going to be factors of 10 or a power of 10. Fractions such as 1/3, 2/7, and 4/9 are not easily converted to equivalent decimals by changing their denominator to a 10, 100, or 1,000. In this case, you can change a fraction to a decimal by using the meaning of the fraction bar. The fraction bar, which separates the numerator from the denominator, means to divide. So this first example that we see, now we should already know that a fraction means that we will be using division. 3/8 means 3 divided by 8. So you can see in the example how they use the traditional division that we talked about back in chapter 3. The quotient that they come up with, 0.375 in the first example, that decimal is called a terminating decimal because there is a remainder of 0. The denominator divides evenly into the numerator. If you take a look at the example on the bottom, again, we understand that a fraction means division. 2/3 means 2 divided by 3. With the answer that we come up with for this division problem, 0.666, you can see that there is a bar over the 6, which means that the 6 digit is going to repeat without ending. This decimal, 0.66, is called a repeating decimal. A repeating decimal is a decimal in which a digit or a group of digits is going to repeat without end. The denominator is not going to divide evenly into the numerator. So let's go ahead and turn to page 256, and this is how we are going to finish off the lesson for today. We are going to be converting fractions into decimals using traditional division. So take a look at the top of the page and look at number 6. We are going to convert each fraction to a decimal, and we want to make sure that we round each decimal to the nearest thousandth. So go ahead and do A through H with your group members for number 6. Here is what letter A would look like when I show traditional division to convert each fraction into a decimal. 8 is going to be my divisor, 1 is going to be my dividend, and I can see that this is a terminating decimal. 125 thousandths would be my answer. Here are the rest of the answers then that you should have for number 6, B through H. Again, remember you were rounding to the nearest thousandth. So letter B, you should have 300 thousandths. Letter C, 600 thousandths. Letter D, 286 thousandths. Letter E, 333 thousandths. Letter F, 444 thousandths. Letter G, 520 thousandths. And letter H, 350 thousandths. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for number 7. For A through I want you to convert each fraction to a decimal. This time we are rounding each decimal to the nearest hundredth. Here is what your work would look like when showing traditional division in order to convert 1/9 into a decimal. 11 hundredths would be my answer. Here is what the rest of your answer should look like then for B through I. For letter B, you should have 22 hundredths. Letter C, 33 hundredths. Letter D, 44 hundredths. Letter E, 56 hundredths. Letter F, 67 hundredths. Letter G, 78 hundredths. Letter H, 89 hundredths. And letter I, 1.00. That is it today for lesson 4.3. and fraction and decimal equivalents. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.